Call to order the Tuesday, February 2nd, 2016 meeting of the Iredell County Board of Commissioners. At this time, if you'd please join me in a moment of silent prayer of reflection. If you'll please stand and join us with the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Smith, if you would please review any adjustments to the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make 3 adjustments to the agenda. The first would be the removal of item C under administrative matters, and this was budget amendment number 24. I'd like to add an item F under administrative matters, and that would be a proclamation to honor the Carolina Panthers football team. And I'd like to remove the closed session item, which is property acquisition.
Is there a motion to approve the adjustments to the agenda?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Vice Chairman Norman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. At this time, we would like to recognize a long-term member of the Iredell County staff, Mr. Sam Bailey from Building Standards, who will be retiring, and Commissioner Tommy Bowles will give him the appropriate recognition and send-off.
Mr. Bailey, Sam. How you doing this evening, sir?
Yeah, I'm glad you found this.
Absolutely. I see you brought some reinforcements with you this evening. What can I say about Sam Bailey? Well, he and I both came to the county at about the same time as far as my first tenure as commissioner, and Sam came into the Building Standards Department. I think it was called inspections back then. But nevertheless, I thought a lot about this, Sam, about what can I say about you, and I thought, no, I don't want to say that in public. I'm just kidding. Sam Bailey is a guy that he's a hybrid. He's a blend. He blends the state standard that it takes to keep the public safe, and he blends it with common sense as he does in inspection. I've seen Sam out many days operating in the inspection department, and he's always professional. He's always about his business. He'll stand and talk for a moment, but he won't stand too long. He won't stand long enough to pay for lunch either. But he does. He's a great, great guy. He's a guy that I admire and that I look up to, because in the building business, you've got to keep the public safe, and you've got to keep the builders and the developers to where they can continue producing their product. And I think Sam does one of the best jobs of that of anybody I've ever seen. He is very qualified. He holds certifications in just about everything. I don't know, level 3, would you say level 3 inspector, and 5 different items there. And even has his broker's license, I understand. So it's one of those things where Sam comes well-rounded and able and capable of doing the job. And he's just a nice guy in the process. He really, really is. And I will hand this over and let you see it.
Sam, on behalf of the Iredell County and the Building Standards Department, I want to thank you for your hard work and dedication during the past 18 years as we congratulate you on your retirement. I know we will all come to appreciate you even more when we try to fill the void that you will leave. The level of certifications that you have obtained in conjunction with your years of service, you have provided excellent customer service to the citizens and contractors of Iredell County. We all send our very best wishes for a happy retirement. Congratulations on a job well done and a retirement well deserved.
Well, sometimes I'm a little bit spoken for words, but I appreciate this and appreciate Tommy. Tommy, like I said, we came about the same time, and I got some wise information and different things from a person well known between me and Tommy. Had to be his dad. I know his dad quite well, been around him a long time. He's a good friend of mine. And if anybody missed him, we'll miss him. And like I said, I miss all the guys that I work with here. And I will have to say, I did leave the county, but I weigh my options. I haven't retired. I haven't returned my papers in. I was told I had till May the 13th. So it is a lot of options out there right now in the field, other places, and I will make that decision by that time.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your service. We really do. You're a good man, Sam. Thank you.
Well, as judges would say from the bench, they'll take judicial notice that Sam has aged more gracefully than his contemporary Commissioner Bowles.
Yeah, he hasn't been through as many budget sessions as I have.
Okay, we'll now move on to a public hearing to consider a request from Ralph Daetwyler to rezone 3.34 acres from M2 conditional use development to M2 conditional development. Mr. Matthew Todd will outline the request.
Good evening to the board. Tonight we do have a rezoning request before us. It's outlined in blue on the screen. It's currently zoned into conditional use district for the for hangars in the storage of planes. The request is for 3.34 acres at 111 and 117 Yeager Road in Mooresville. There are 2 existing hangars on the property and 1 vacant parcel in the middle. Staff supports this request based on the rezoning will be site plan specific and only minor changes will take place. Only airplane related uses are allowed. The current zoning is high intensity use. And potential traffic impacts should not exceed the road capacity. This is a map showing the future land use plan. This is a map showing the aerial, and you can see the 2 hangars in question, along with the parcel in the center that's used for airplane tie-down storage. A few pictures of the property in question. And while we're looking at this picture, I'll just note that the request, again, for tonight is that the existing hangars will still be used for storage, but the front part of this hangar will be also used for maintenance. That is the specific request. When you go in this hangar, there is a dividing wall between these 2 sides of it. So it's only this front portion, you can see that on your site plan, that is for the maintenance. The remainder back here will still be only used for airplane storage, the other hangar for storage, and then the vacant parcel will only allow for airplane tie-down to storage. Just some additional photos. That's looking back up away from the site. That's the second hangar that is currently used for airplane storage, and under the proposed rezoning is still only airplane storage. This is the back side of the property near Mooresville's jurisdiction. There is the site plan. That's the building that I mentioned is going to be broken up into aircraft maintenance on this end, plane storage on the back side. And I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Mr. Thomas, we spoke earlier. You said that there would be no fuel sales associated with this maintenance.
Correct. No fuel cells would be allowed.
Maintenance of a plane would consist of an oil change, whatever kind of little repair it needed.
The maintenance, actually, it would be anything related to aircraft, and aircraft only. No other type of maintenance, no vehicle maintenance. Aircraft specifically is the only type of maintenance that could occur.
I assume they do annual inspections of aircraft there. Most of those guys do.
Yes.
So the current zoning is storage only. So you literally couldn't do inspections, or you couldn't do any kind of maintenance whatsoever.
That's correct. The current is for hangars for storage only.
And this applies solely to half of one hangar. Is that correct?
This request, it's to achieve some consistency down there. We're grouping the three parcels together under this request, but in reality, the only change is half of one hangar. And again, that's again to achieve some consistency. So when you look at this, those three parcels are going to refer back to this same rezoning request instead of currently. There's probably 10 or 12 different zoning districts down there that are all essentially the same. So in trying to move to limiting the number of cases, we grouped them together. But again, the only real change is for that one hangar, half of it being for maintenance, half of it being for storage.
I'll direct these comments to Mr. Todd, but actually, Mr. Chairman, what I'm attempting to do is give the folks who may be here to speak in regard to this matter, either pro or con, some heads up as to at least issues in my mind they need to address as they speak to the board. I go back a good ways on this airport down there. I might be one of the few people outside of folks in that development who actually saw one of the initial sales brochures on it where it was marketed as a private airport. And I want to say publicly, I'm not holding Mr. Todd accountable nor anybody else from the county. This thing kind of evolved into what it is. But that's the way it was marketed. And those folks actually bought those parcels in good faith, thinking they were going to have a nice, quiet airport that they could live there and pursue their hobby at their leisure and in some solitude. And then, again, not speaking ill of the dead, but you know, the truth, Doc Wilson had a bad habit of not asking for permission nearly as much as he asked for forgiveness. So every time, to some extent, we have a rezoning request down there, it's always like we're trying to tidy up some loose ends. But each time it seems like the activity becomes a little more aggressive in what we're doing. And there's a question in my mind, is aircraft maintenance facility in this hangar, is it viable for aircraft that are on the field or to be financially viable, will they have to bring in work, other aircraft moving in and out of the airfield? And Mr. Robertson brought up a good point in the agenda briefing when he tested me on, and I didn't take any offense at it. It was a legitimate question when he tested me on my propensity, I guess, to be a firm believer in property rights. And I am, but some demonstration needs to be made by letting the applicant exercise property rights on his property that it's not going to be detrimental to other folks who have a piece of property on that airfield. And at least when they bought it, had some expectations that they weren't going to be overrun or overwhelmed with commercial activity on that airfield. So those are the concerns that the applicant speaks or anyone else. Those are the questions in my mind as we approach this matter.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Todd? Thank you, Mr. Todd. At this time, we will open the public hearing in this matter. There are two individuals who have signed up, Walter Siegenthaler and Russell Jones. There may be other additional people that have come into the hearing that did not have the opportunity to sign up, and we will give you an opportunity to be heard as well. So I'll call first and ask you to, when you approach the podium, to please, for the record, state your name and your address. And please note that there's a 5-minute limitation to your remarks. And so, Mr. Siegenthaler.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Walter Siegenthaler, and I reside at 22641 Torrance Chapel Road in Cornelius. And I'm a partner in 14 Alphas, a company that owns the property which we're talking about. And as Mr. Todd already explained, we're not looking at doing any structural changes. The reason we like to change it over so we can offer maintenance, airplane maintenance, and that's primarily for the airplanes stationed at the airport. Because I don't even know exactly how many airplanes there are there, but I think there are about 50 airplanes stationed at the airport. Right now, there is no maintenance available. There used to be until that property got sold and is not used as aircraft maintenance anymore. So that means, if the point was asked, well, are annual inspections done too? That's definitely a thing. That means every airplane that's on the airfield right now has to fly out of there in order to get at least the annual inspection done. So I think it's a clear need for the area, for all aircraft owners on the field there. We are not going to do any jet maintenance or helicopter maintenance, so it's really just small aircrafts. That's all we want to do. And as I said, it's mainly for the service. Mm-hmm. To be honest, financially, we don't really gain anything out of it, but it's a service. We have some airplanes there ourselves, so obviously there's a self-interest there. Other than that, the only change, if you want to call it a change, is we are going to mark 3 car parking spots on the existing pavement along one of the hangars for the employees to park, but no structural change again. So I ask you to support this rezoning to offer that service to the people on the airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siegenthaler. One question for me. Did you canvass any of the folks in the neighborhood that have property on the runway, or people who are storing planes at your facility, and get some feedback from them about whether they wanted you to offer that service or not?
We had an information back, I think, in November. It was publicized to all the people around in the area, as is required. Mm-hmm. And we had 2 people showing up, and they were both in favor of doing it. Nobody spoke against it.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Yes, sir. How extensive is your maintenance going to be? You going to do in-frame overhauls? You going to do?
It's mainly oil changes, small repairs, and annuals. That's the main purpose, because we're not looking at really rebuilding complete airplanes, no.
You going to do any avionics repair there? Is that going to be off-site?
Not at this point, I think, because it's a friend of ours who would be running the maintenance, and his part is on the mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your hours of operation?
Just regular day hours. We're not.
Monday through Friday, 8 to 5?
Monday through Friday, including probably Saturdays, yeah, but regular hours. We're not looking at midnight shifts.
Any Sunday operations?
Not for the maintenance, no. And again, as the question was asked before, no fuel sale. We are not looking at having a fixed base operation there. It's just a maintenance shop, and that's why it's primarily for the airplanes which are already on the airfield.
How long would typically what's happened? It seems to me, sir, that if a business entity becomes somewhat successful down there, they quickly run out of room. Do you think you have adequate space to service the people on this airfield and what folks may land there without coming back and asking for a subsequent amendment to this rezoning or to expand the commercial use district on that airfield?
We have no intentions to do that, because that shop is big enough for a small maintenance shop, and we're looking at a 1- or 2-man operation there, and it's not big enough to do a full FBO or a big shop, and that's not what we're looking at. We wanted to provide the storage for airplanes there, as we have done in the past, and if something doesn't work out with maintenance, we may go back and store airplanes again, because we do not change the hangar itself.
And perhaps Mr. Todd will have to clarify this, but I go back sort of my original question concerning, is this just looking at the one hangar with half the hangar being designated for this request? And the impression I got from Mr. Todd was it's the entire 3 parcels, and if that's the case, then any subsequent purchasers or owners could conceivably turn the whole thing into an aircraft maintenance thing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to clarify that.
Well, maybe I can give you part of the answer. The second hangar is not suitable for maintenance because there are carousels in there, so that where we actually put the airplanes on so they can rotate the airplanes till theirs is in the front, pull it out, so they don't have to move all the other ones. So there are 2 carousels in there. That's not a hangar that's suitable for maintenance.
Again, because this request is site plan specific, it refers back to that site plan. You can clearly see on that site plan that this is a zoomed in version of the site plan you have in your packet, but they have to comply with this site plan unless they come back through for another rezoning. Okay. So they've got 4,969 square feet for plane storage, 5,091 square feet for aircraft maintenance. That's what they're stuck with. Even though this rezoning includes the other hangar that's over this way, that hangar on that site plan says for storage. So that is what they're stuck with.
Okay. Any additional questions? Thank you, Mr. Siegenthaler. Okay. Mr. Russell Jones. Sure.
Thanks, sir.
I got a couple of quick statements.
Could you just say your name and your address?
Russell Jones, I live at 362 Normandy Road. I was not notified of this change, even though the end of this runway where these maintained airplanes fly oftentimes comes directly over my house. If you remember me, I spoke at several occasions about the IOMAX zoning request. That hasn't worked out like you guys thought it would. You've gotten some complaints from me, so has the county sheriff. They're not quite the good actors, but I don't want to, that they pretended to be, I don't want to color anything about this applicant nor Mr. Daetwyler. I don't know them personally, and I hold no grudges. What I want to point out is that when you zoned IOMAX, you told us there wouldn't be any Me Too zoning. IOMAX has the right to maintain aircraft. You gave them that. On that site, there are several thousand square feet where they can perform aircraft maintenance. That's enough for that site. Number two, and far more importantly, you guys are creating an increasing risk and safety hazard. The reason I passed out this map is to point out some adjacent parcels, and I wish, is there any way you can project this as paper? Oh, good. An old-fashioned. Got a pointer for me? No, I can.
Matthew angled, I think you angled.
Yeah, you're right.
We're close enough.
Why don't you flip it around so it's...
All right, this is my house right here. You going to move around? All right. Let's get it to the right way. This is my house right here. This is the area, including IMX, in question, which is conditional use, rather risky from my perspective. As of yesterday, Mooresville rezoned this 50-acre lot R3. There are going to be 150 homes, and they, unfortunately, I was unable to get the site plan, but they are highly clustered. If you look here, Byers Creek is almost full. It's R4. This plot has been recently zoned by the town of Mooresville as R9 multifamily. The schools still exist. You guys can't continue to increase air traffic on this air park. It's open to the public, but it's a residential air park. It's meant to support the 40 or so houses around it and the 35 or 40 aircraft in those houses. It wasn't meant for IMAX, and it's really not meant as a maintenance base for other aircraft. Now, if there's a way you can restrict him, Mr. Daetwyler, to the 35 or so aircraft that are residential there, or maybe at 40 or 50 if you include some of the tie-downs, we'd be okay with that, but you haven't, and this is a slippery slope, a really slippery slope. Look at this cluster. Look at the number of people you're going to have here. Look at this. This is R9, multifamily. This is R4, and it's almost complete. You've got schools here. This has gotten already out of hand. You've heard my complaints about noise. There's been FAA violations. IOMAX hot rod aircraft pilots have been buzzing the tower. I was on the air park and watched one of them come in over a student pilot apparently without announcing himself. Now, I wasn't privy to the radio conversations, but I understand after the fact he didn't even announce himself to the tower. He just came in hot, flew past IOMAX, circled around, by the way, over the top of this school, came back, and the poor student had actually taxied out to the end of the runway. By the time he radioed, he had to come in over the top of him. So we've got bad behaviors going on. I don't want to accuse these folks of participating. I don't know that they have. But you've created a bit of a monster here in the middle of what used to be relatively sparse residential space. The last airplane crash we had there was in a tree. The next one isn't going to be in a tree, gentlemen. And I'm here to tell you that there'll probably be some legal responsibility on your part should somebody come down in these highly dense areas. I think Jake will speak a bit to what the flight paths look like around here. I can't speak to that. I'm not a pilot. Steve, I think you've addressed some of these concerns. I can't help that you want to rectify the sins of the past, but you're doing it at the expense and risk of the neighborhood. And that's just unacceptable as far as we're concerned. I don't know who got the notice. You know, you can see that there's a limited number of properties that are adjacent. There's nobody here yet. There's nobody here yet. But there will be soon. And I think you've got a real safety problem. Hundreds, if not thousands, of folks are going to be moving into this area. You can't continue to add air traffic, especially commercial air traffic. People who don't live there to that airport. It defies logic and, in my opinion, common sense. Thanks for your time. And I really would like to see you forego this request. The services are available. It's not an additional service. IOMAX can offer those services if they choose. They have actually chosen, probably because they can't make any money, to discontinue those services. So it's not a new service to be offered. Like I said, I don't have anything against Daetwyler or his partners. I would have much preferred that they got this service than IOMAX did, but that's water under your bridge, not mine. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
There's one,
Do you have a...
well, more of a statement. That's uncontrolled airspace, but there's no Unicom service down there. Is that right, Jake? They don't have... Okay. Well, maybe INVOCATION needs to start using it a little better. Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that'd like to be heard? Okay. If you'll just please come up and state your name and address. I've got that. I'm going to write it in.
The first thing I wanted to ask you, one of my neighbors couldn't be here, and he sent out an email. His name was Mark Queen. He just wanted to make sure that you were in receipt of the email from him. I had a copy of it, and there was an attachment to it that was a NOTAM, and I don't know if you know what a NOTAM is. Steve might. I'm sure he does, I should say. Notice to Airmen is a rule that's filed with the FAA, for a rule that's on site on that field that's specific to the field. IOMAX a few months ago. Wait,
who are you? State your name again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jake D. Atterbury is my name.
Okay, you're going to have to help me with your last name.
Atteberry.
Atterbury, okay.
I'm sorry.
And your address, where do you live?
160 Catawba Road. I'm directly across the street of Catawba Road from the commercial area at the air park. I'm a 20-year resident of the air park community there. We built our own home there back in 95 to 98.
Yes, we're talking to the mic.
Okay. Anyhow, I wanted to thank you so much, Steve, for your speech about the history of the air park. You're exactly right on with that. 20 years ago, my family moved here, and we didn't have any children. We started that with a new home, and we love living there. But the hangars that were down there, we always knew something may happen like this. But there were zoning flaws. There was an overworked, underpaid planning board staff, and there was always some problems with the zoning map line or whatever, and so that we've had, Steve is familiar with all that to get to where we're at today. My biggest concern is the storage hangars only was always fine. It was an economically viable business to rent out storage hangars. You can get in that particular hangar that they're doing there probably 10 airplanes. depending on what sizes. At a minimum, you would get 6 to 7, and hangar rent in that area is about $250 per plane. The hangars, like I said, were always supposed to be hangar aircraft storage only, because they were also worried about one time using them for like semi-trucks, things along those lines. So they made it specific to the airplane storage. 1 year ago, of course, we took the IOMAX intro with all of their commercial spaces. I think their square footage there is around 30,000. That's kind of where another 5,000. We feel we're at capacity right now. We just don't think we could take any more. Mr. Johnson, you had a question that I wanted to try to answer the best I could for you. And yes, you would have to bring in other aircraft to survive in this business at that airport. Living there 20 years, there's been maintenance shops there in the past in different buildings and stuff before all the remodeling and everything had happened. Nobody ever survived with the maintenance on the field. It's very common for any of these pilots, they're professional pilots, to also have a mechanic's license. When you're wanting to be a professional pilot, you're trying to say to yourself that you're going to have perfect health until you're 65 years old when you're allowed to retire. A lot of times that doesn't happen, so almost every one of them has a mechanic's license. I would guess, I'm positive that there's a minimum of 20 out of there. So out of 10 residents that are not affiliated with airplanes at all, there's 40 of us left. Out of that 40, I know at least 20 of them are mechanics. I happen to be also a mechanic. And in the past, like I said, it's always been the transients that have supported this type of business that has come in and out of there. The public hearing meeting that you mentioned also that nobody had showed up for, we kind of used to be able to bring a lot of people to these meetings, but there's so much going on in the area there, and this new development that a lot of people are worried about off of Normandy Road. I think they're a little bit worn out after the IMAX thing with it just being a year later, but at the same time, that public hearing meeting was the week of Thanksgiving. And so everybody was already out of town, kind of. It was on a Tuesday, and then, Wednesday, Thursday, everybody's taken off to go get to their families. So that might explain a little bit of why there was only 2 people that showed up there that was there. Is there any other questions that I could answer for you?
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Adamberry, you might explain Unicom to them. Just because you have radio communication on the field, it's not mandated that somebody actually be manning the radio. If somebody's listening to the radio, they respond. If nobody's there, nobody responds. Is that an accurate statement?
That is correct, yes. Unicom is a frequency that's assigned to certain airports. Unfortunately, when you're up in the air, you tend to transmit a farther distance than that. So it's very common for when we transmit, we actually also hear Rowan County. They actually have the same frequency. So it's not uncommon for that to occur. So back to reducing the traffic on the channel, the FAA doesn't assign any more frequencies. There's only so many of those that are set up. You almost have to almost think of it as like a party line, when your phone, everybody would ring at the same time. But the NOTAM I was also mentioning to you, too. Were you able to pull that up that was referenced in Mr. Queen's email? The notice to airmen was for shutting down the ramp space in front of the IOMAX hangar, and he had some concerns with it that he mentioned in his email. That was why that was in there. I thought I might explain it better.
So previously, there was some general aviation that had maintenance activities available.
Correct. But when IOMAX bought them, they used that service for a couple of years, but then, like I said, their business grew up, and they seem to be doing really good right now. I think they're up to 2 airplanes a month, and I met some of the fellows that work down there, actually really nice people. But at the same time, they're busy. That's a 3-shift operation down there. They never stop, 7 days a week. They were there all through the holidays, too, and they're moving product.
You say most people who have a pilot's license also do the work on their own planes.
Yes, sir. It's very common. Sometimes you're the only one you want to do the maintenance. Tend to feel a little safer doing it that way.
Is there anyone that's on the air park as a resident that would benefit from this service?
The service has always been available at Statesville Airport. There's a wonderful business up there by the name of Iredell Air Care. I think it's over 35 years old. Mr. Jones Barnes runs that service. I know a lot of people that go up there to him, and just because he is a very good mechanic and specific airplane types he's very good in. So I know he has quite a loyal following. But, I mean, does Jones come down there and sometimes make house calls? That may happen. I don't know how many, but he's a real nice fellow. I kind of hate to see somebody economically impact him with a little shop, you know. That would be my concern. But I don't see anybody there on the field that would, you know, benefit from it other than the fact that, yeah, I guess they wouldn't have to take their plane up there. But you don't fly a broke airplane. You know, if you need to get some work done to you, you just find out how to do it. Mm-hmm.
So, saying if they don't have the ability, you know, if someone doesn't have the ability to repair it themselves,
Yes, sir.
they rely on someone coming down there and perform the work.
If they had to, if the aircraft was unairworthy, you know, such as an example would be you walked out into the hangar in your morning and there was oil all over the floor and you're, holy cow, you know, obviously it's not airworthy, so you'd have to have a mechanic inspect it at that time. But we're talking about, there's very few of my neighbors that use their planes for business. I mean, or it's more pleasure than anything. It's a luxury item. There are some that do it for their personal businesses, yes, but those are the only ones that have to go.
I'm just curious here. Okay. If, let's say you're storing a plane at this facility, you come out, fly it, and you find the puddle of oil. Mm-hmm. You're not going to fly it.
Okay.
You're going to have to get somebody to come down, if you're not a mechanic, to repair it.
Sure.
So isn't that performing aircraft maintenance in that facility?
Sure.
So that's performing an activity that is, by definition, not allowed.
In that hangar right now, that's the storage hangar, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So
I think
practical realities, it would seem to me, is that to bring, if that periodically happens, if that's within the realm of the possible, then this request basically brings that activity into compliance.
Wow. Okay. I understand. Like I said, it's just more activity that, you know, we don't know how long IMAX is going to be there. We're worried about when their buildings come back up for another use. We kind of feel that, you know, if one maintenance shop's already here, would anybody want to come in and maintain against them? They've got their provisions for a race shop there. We're really hoping that never happens. You know, but that is what IMAX has, along with all the other things. They could even put 3 different maintenance shops there if they wanted to. There's 3 different buildings. I understand what you're saying. I really think we've just got capacity. We've just got enough. That's really my whole goal with it.
Any further questions or comments? Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Atterbury.
Thank you very much for listening to me.
And we had one other person, I believe. Okay. You state your name and address for the record.
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Rob Porter. I live at 123 Rutan Court. It's the home closest to what we at the air park refer to as the commercial area, all the M2 zoned properties. And I've been living at the air park for the last 22 years. If I could maybe explain a little bit more what Mr. Atterbury was speaking on as far as maintenance that occurs inside of a storage hangar versus a maintenance facility. We're talking about an abnormal situation where you'd come in and have to bring in a mechanic to do maintenance on the airplane. I don't think anybody at the air park has a problem with that. But when you open a maintenance base, then you're bringing in outside traffic. You're increasing the amount of traffic through the air park and increasing the amount of commercial activity right next to a residential area. That said, a lot of my issues with this current rezoning request stem from last year's rezoning request with IOMAX. So last year, IOMAX already had the capability to do aircraft maintenance. They received additional permissions for their property to do light manufacturing, and that's what they're doing. So now we're going to try to establish a second facility to do aircraft maintenance, which I just don't see how it's fair for the residents of the air park to be held responsible that the property already zoned for aircraft maintenance is not currently performing aircraft maintenance. And I feel that we're going to reach a situation where we're going to establish a new maintenance facility. Then IOMAX is either going to outgrow their current facility, which they're very close to at this time, or just simply relocate, and then we're going to be left with a conditional use zone property that can have a race team, dance studio, or any other number of non-aviation related uses that do not belong at the air park. That's my biggest concern, is the future of the properties going forward. Earlier it was said that this rezoning request was site plan specific, and so he must comply with the regulation that the maintenance is only done in one half of that hangar. I hate to say it, but I don't have strong faith that any of these requests or any of these stipulations on the zoning are upheld or enforced, because there's the last two zoning requests on the IOMAX properties. There was a stipulation there was supposed to be an L-shaped noise-protecting berm to insulate my property. A note was brought up at the end of the discussion last year when the zoning passed for them. My berm is still not in place, so I don't have good faith that these, stipulations can be enforced. That's all I have. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much. Any further questions?
Mr. Porter, do you feel like this man's facility is going to serve a lot more customers than just the ones who are residents of that air park?
I think we're going to serve some air park residents with that property, but I think the primary customer base is going to come from people who are tied down at that facility and from neighboring airports. So I think we'll see people coming in for maintenance from Lincoln County Airport, from Statesville Airport, from Concord Airport. So I do think we will increase the amount of transient traffic.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional questions? Comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Porter.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask Mr. Siegenthaler if he would answer a quick question.
Yep.
To what extent does your business model rely on traffic in addition to either the air park residents or the currently stored or the maximum capacity for storage and tie-down at your facility?
Well, I may have to say one thing first, because IOMAX came up so many times. And the fellow who would be doing the maintenance, who would run the maintenance shop there, he was in that building till he got kicked out. And it's not that he didn't survive. He got kicked out because they needed the space. So it has been working before. So it's just now he would have a space again if he gets that rezoning approved. And I don't know exactly what his mix was before. But on the other hand, it was mentioned that a lot of pilots do their own maintenance. If they are aircraft mechanics, yes, they're allowed to do that. But then I'm not so sure if that is a legal activity wherever they do that. It doesn't necessarily all just happen only in our hangars, because the residents have their own hangars. Are they approved for maintenance? My question there. I think by offering the service, we offer at least a possibility that they can do it legally without flying out. And yes, I can't promise that there are no airplanes coming in from someplace else. That happens all the time. On the other hand, anyone that's at the air park and gets a maintenance started doesn't have to fly out. That also cuts back 2 traffic cycles.
Any additional questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and call for any questions or comments from members of the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're confusing, or not confusing, but we're talking an awful lot about IOMAX tonight. But the piece of legislation that is before us tonight doesn't have anything to do with IOMAX. Now, perhaps we made a mistake a year ago, but nevertheless, so I don't think we ought to penalize another owner for a mistake we made a year ago. But I don't see that the rezone request that is asked is that much out of the question. That's just my personal opinion.
Any other comments?
I think to some degree IMAX is related in that in the property that they own, Mr. Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, aircraft maintenance is permitted that IMAX owns.
Yes.
Okay, so by granting this request, we would actually be expanding the area in which aircraft maintenance would be permitted, because this is a separate parcel from them.
That's correct.
Okay, so a subsequent property owner, if IMAX left, a subsequent property owner and or occupant could perform aircraft maintenance by right. And then we would still have this property where you could do aircraft maintenance by right. Is that correct?
Yes.
We've got the question I got in my mind, in the 150 homes in R3, those landowners, would they be more likely or less likely to have bought their homes if they knew it was going to be, that home was going to be adjacent to a commercial air park as opposed to a residential air park? And I see potentially some problem down the road if we continue to expand the availability of aircraft services on what was initially a private air park. If we're expanding the use of commercial activity on that airfield while simultaneously seeing increased density of population around that air park. At some point, those two things become increasingly incongruent, incompatible. That's a concern.
How is that different from a neighborhood that is adjacent to a farm with cows and pastures, and when that farmer wants to sell his land with cows and pastures, that all those neighbors in that neighborhood, you know, that they, if you convert what used to be a farm into a subdivision, then it's more traffic than all of those people had expected. And certainly their view in the pastoral setting that they were in is different than what they expected. You know what? You know, I'm not so sure I understand what's the difference.
One thing, those cows aren't going to be flying over their house. I mean, you're talking. That's not apple. That's
well,
apples and
there's
oranges.
already airplanes in that airspace, so, and there's a risk inherent in that, and everybody who buys a house is going to know that they're near airspace. So it's like, well, if 12 airplanes are flying, I'm okay. I don't know how many take off and land every day, but if 12 take off and land every day, I'm building a house in the subdivision. But if 15 take off every day, I'm not building a subdivision. And I mean, I have no idea how many takeoffs and landings per day or per week are going to be added if we let this guy do what he says is, in essence, minor maintenance in half a building. So, you know, kind of I just think as a board we should be consistent. We should be consistent, which is if we are going to not deny people their property rights to do something with their property because adjacent property owners had expectations, then that's not how we've ruled in the past, any more than we've ruled in the past that if we think you have a bad business model, we won't rezone the property and let you have a business. Somebody says, I want to build a dollar store in an intersection. We go, we've never denied them the right to build a dollar store at that intersection because we thought there was another dollar store, 6 miles away, and we don't think you're going to do very well, so we're not going to give you the permit. We've given people the freedom to build businesses, even if we weren't so sure that they were going to be successful in those businesses. So, I mean, I'm sympathetic to the homeowners. I bought a house from the same developer who certainly sold blue sky and sunshine with any land that he sold. So I'm familiar with that, and also some expectations that we were led to believe of adjacent properties and how they could and could not be used turned out not to be true. So I just wanted to, I'm just trying to understand how this board, how we make decisions, because historically we've not ruled against property owners because of the expectations of adjacent property owners, and it's always a gray area. So I'm not fussing with Mr. Johnson. His questions are totally legitimate, and all of us struggle with those questions. I'm just trying to illustrate a bit of the predicament that we get in, because adjacent property owners almost always prefer that undeveloped property remain undeveloped. Almost always that's the case.
Some things in zoning, though, and I appreciate your comments, Mr. Brooks. Some things in zoning are done by right, and some are not, and that's why we have a zoning process. So it's not totally relevant. The other thing is that if Statesville Airport's been there since shortly after the war, and I've had complaints since we expanded the airport out there of people, why you support expanding the airport? I live there. Well, they built their house there knowing a commercial public airfield was there. And did they really expect that it was going to be the same 50 years later? That's an unrealistic expectation. But when you have a private airfield that was marketed as a private development with limited access to the outside public, then that's a different animal. And what you have is you have two considerations here, and I can't speak as to how the entire board votes, but it has always been my deliberative process that it is the job of the applicant to demonstrate why he should be allowed to do that and why he should be allowed to exercise his rights on his property. And he must demonstrate that it's not going to be detrimental to his neighbors. And it's the job of the neighbors to demonstrate that his activity is going to be detrimental to that. And I've always said it, if you come to these proceedings with your mind made up, you're probably not being fair. But if you don't have some idea how you're going to vote before you get here, you haven't done your homework. So you walk in here predisposed to vote a certain way, hoping that something will come to light in the course of the discussion that may impact your decision. And what we have is a decision that looks like it was made by the Mooresville Town Board, and that further complicates the matter because with the extension of utilities, you're going to see increased density of residential development around this airfield. And if IMAX leaves, then that property owner who occupies or owns that property can maintain aircraft by right. So we're going to expand that right to someone else. So the more capability you have to do aircraft maintenance, the more likely you are to bring more activity to that airfield. And I'm not at all sure that making those services available at a private air park in the middle of all this residential development is a good idea. The rent would be higher at Statesville Airport, but you're willing to pay the rent, they'll give you some space out there, I'm sure. Now, I'll speak briefly to the IMAX thing, and as Mr. Bowles alluded to, perhaps we made a mistake doing that, but I tell you folks, you should have been in one of those chairs that thing came down. That thing came from the stratosphere. There were some very high-ranking federal officials who wanted that to happen, and it was pretty much, you write a check, shut up, and get out of the way. And it has international consequences, and I won't get into all that, but I just see some potential problems down the road if we go too far with commercial activity with that density of population around it. And if this was someone wanting to locate a public airfield, FAA today would never allow that. It never happened. You don't have a displaced threshold. You don't have a safety area off the end of that runway. I mean, at the end of the runway is Normandy Road. It never happened. And someday, folks, I've been at 8,000 feet when an engine started missing. It ain't fun. And somebody's going to go off the end of that runway one of these days, and they ain't going to make it.
I just don't remember these arguments when IOMAX was here.
Well, it's the reason I expressed earlier. It came out of the stratosphere.
Mr. Chairman, with the IOMAX, they don't do maintenance for the public.
No.
So at this particular point, even though it is a aircraft maintenance facility, it doesn't do the folks at the air park any good at all because they can't get their planes maintained there. This would be a small little area where they could get an annual, where they could get an oil change. I'd like to just bring out that point.
Any further comments? You know, the IOMAX discussion, I'll say that I personally never received any guidance from on high or the stratosphere about how to make a decision on that piece. Clearly, there are some national security larger concerns based on the work they do, but that was, at least to me, never communicated as a reason to grant or not grant any of the requests that they had. And that took a lot of work to that they were not happy about. I don't think anybody was happy with the result, which probably means we reached out the sweet spot that you possibly could in terms of balancing out the various considerations. That being said, looking at this particular issue from my perspective and taking into consideration the points that have been raised, which are good ones, it appears that this maintenance facility is a replacement of a pre-existing maintenance activity. And so whatever air traffic was coming in from outside the area is, from experience, not likely, in my view, it's not been shown one way or the other that would increase or decrease. So I don't see that there's the likelihood of a significant increase. It's speculative at best. It's also been noted for the record that general aviation, when you had those facilities in what IOMAX currently occupies, was not a viable business model, that it couldn't support itself. And that's why IOMAX is there. But there does seem to be some demand for these limited services offered by this one mechanic or two, given this is a unique parcel of land. It has unique history. It has unique placement. I don't think we can appropriately apply any general rule to anything that is done at this location. It, by its very nature, has to be worked through focusing on individual equities and burdens and benefits. Relative to future homes, clearly, the action last night by the town of Mooresville to approve R3 for 150 homes and R9 for multifamily is an approval of future development, and by its very nature, anyone that moves in there will have notice of whatever activities are permitted at the air park. So,
Got one question for Mr. Todd. Mr. Todd, do you have any idea how many planes are in and out there in a day's time?
I do not. Over the years, I've heard mixed numbers. So.
How about the owner here?
I don't have any numbers either, but let's face it, an airplane that comes in for maintenance is going to be sitting there probably for 2-3 days, especially if it's an annual, so it's not flying during that time. And if we have 5 or 6 airplanes in that space where we do maintenance, they may be flying during that time. So I think there is really not a big increase. And all that was mentioned, yes, there are crazy pilots out there. I used to be a pilot myself. I'm not flying anymore, but there are crazy pilots out there. But that has nothing to do with the maintenance facility on the ground. It's the people.
Okay, and the next question, do you have any idea of your workload you anticipating coming to you?
How many additional takeoffs and landings per day?
If that adds 2 takes off or landings, then I think that's a lot, because a maintenance on an airplane is not a matter of just 5 minutes, typically. So if you bring the airplane in there, okay, for an oil change, you may still spend an hour or 2 for it to be done. And typically for an oil change, you may don't fly it to another airfield. You may find somebody, or you have somebody doing it, if legal or not, that's questionable, wherever it is. But especially for annuals and some repair, if there is some repair to be done, the plane is sitting there for a while. So I cannot see that it adds more than 2-3 flights per day. It's probably even less. So I don't think it's a big increase.
Okay.
and
I'd just like to make one point about IMAX. IMAX bought that property prior to the realization of this board. And the Commerce Department gave them an economic incentive at the state level prior to our ever knowledge they were even coming. And then told us, this is unprecedented in my 21 years plus on this board, then requested us to give them an economic incentive of $250,000, and this was in probably early 14. That was, for the first time in my tenure in this board, was not performance-based. And they made that request, and we granted that request. So it did come from somewhere on high. And a former member of Congress, I won't call names, was pretty well connected with the folks at IMAX, and that's the truth of how that happened.
I'll let the record reflect.
That's how it happened. It came from the stratosphere.
But I will reiterate my point, which was that predated my tenure, and no one came to me, and I'm sure no one came to Mr. Bowles, who were not on the commission.
Got here. It was already done.
Well, I can tell you, having gone through a lot of negotiating with all those parties, it didn't seem like a done deal. Okay. We'll go ahead and call the question. Is there a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion. I'll make the motion to recommend in favor of the zoning map amendment and to advise that though it is inconsistent with Iredell County 2030 Horizon Plan, it is reasonable and in the public interest because it is consistent with past rezoning. The property is currently zoned for a high-intensity use and will be a minimal change to the property. It is a conditional site plan-specific request, and potential traffic impact should not exceed capacity.
A motion duly made by Commissioner Robertson. Any further discussion?
I just want to reiterate one point that I don't think I stressed heavily enough. Area zoned on this airfield for aircraft maintenance already exists. We're expanding it. If IMAX leaves, which there's a good possibility they will, then we have it in the owner of this property. It would, if their business plan permits it, it would be in their best interest to expand into the area for aircraft maintenance that already exists, thereby increasing the footprint of aircraft maintenance on the property and running the risk of bringing other aircraft into the airfield over a densely developed residential property. And I just don't think that's wise.
Okay. Any further comments or discussion? All in favor of the motion as made, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign.
No.
Motion carries 4-1. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask that we, if it's in order, to ask our planning director if he can check into the berm for Mr. Porter.
Right.
And make sure that if that was a promise and that was a stipulation, that gets followed through with.
It was not a condition. It was a previous condition with the old rezoning. But when IMAX came through, I'll double check, but it did not make the conditions list. IMAX was adamant that they did not want that as a condition. I think they did say they would do it, but it was not a condition. So it's not going to be something that we can enforce from a zoning perspective.
Mr. Todd, I specifically mentioned in those proceedings that a berm would be there. Now, maybe it didn't make it into the minutes, but that was at my request, and they agreed to do it. Now, maybe the minutes, I'm not going to debate with you here. And, you're a highly competent gentleman, and you're probably right. But I do remember in those proceedings that I requested that they do that, and they agreed to do it.
I remember that there being a willingness on their part to do that.
I do too.
Okay.
Well, perhaps the clerk can retrieve those minutes and share those with parties. And
video anyway. Yeah. Might not be in the minutes, but it would be in video.
At the very least, I think we ought to have a conversation with IOMAX and say, come on, guys, we need to look at this at the very least.
Okay, so if you could retrieve that so that we can contact them if that's appropriate, given the record.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll move on to the there is no new business, and move to the county manager's report. Mr. Smith?
Actually, I'm going to hit the administrative matters first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I? Yeah, I jumped right over those. Sorry about that. Okay. If you could summarize the administrative matters that have been agreed upon for the consent agenda.
Thanks, sir. The first was a request from administration for approval of the First Amendment to the county-funded Assistant District Attorney contract in Budget Amendment number 23. A request from the Tax Administration to report unpaid taxes and set a date for advertising for tax liens, and that date is March 16th. A request from the Finance Department to approve Budget Amendment number 25 for the Workers' Compensation Self-Insurance Fund. A request for approval of the January 19th, 2016 minutes, and to approve a proclamation to honor the Carolina Panthers football team.
Those are the administrative matters as summarized. Is there a motion to approve those as a consent item?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve that with one small amendment. Go Peyton.
Let the record duly reflect Commissioner Johnson's loyalty to Peyton Manning and what is certain to be his last game.
I want to make sure, Madam Clerk, you did get that right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? I think that was
my motion.
that was yours, okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, there is no public comment period for general items today. There's no new business. And
I
now,
have one item, if I could just mention very. I just want to make everybody aware, there is one individual who has served the county for a number of years, and he is an inestimably wise gentleman, and I think he was the first one who ever uttered this word, and the term is inversion. And I would just like to point out, folks, we've lost another one. Johnson Controls will be leaving the country. They sold themselves for $14 billion in an effort to save themselves $150 million a year in federal taxes. It's picking up, guys. The divesting of America. That is not a handwritten creed. I knew that by memory, but I just like, and every time, periodically, I will be reporting back to pay tribute to the gentleman who is inestimably wise, who first uttered that term. Thank you.
and who is the beneficiary of this move? You know? What country?
Yeah, they're going to Ireland.
Ireland, yeah. Well, that will be an appropriate item to share with not only the state economic development team, but also our legislative representatives in Congress and the Senate.
I thought you were going to ask me who was going to get the tribute of my presentation. Well, that was me, just in case.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now, moving on to the county manager's report. You better act quick.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few pretty easy things. Sent you all an email, and it was in the paper, but again, I'd just like to say that we have hired a new e-com director. Candy Straczynski will be coming over from Burke County, and although she's not yet on the payroll, she has been very beneficial to us already. So her connections with the 911 board are going to reap benefits for Iredell County. I can see that already. Briefly, in EMS, and this is timely because we talked about workers' comp at our pre-agenda, we have, through this year's budget, you all approved the purchase of Stryker stretchers, and they're the hydraulic or hydraulically assisted stretchers that are hopefully going to help with back injuries in EMS. A couple weeks ago, if not 3, we got those all in place, and all of our ambulances are outfitted, and training for the rescue squads and so on is taking place if it's not already completed. So that's a good thing for us. Last night we got through the zoning process with the City of Statesville for the jail. So we're pretty much free and clear until we have to go back to them for site plan and building approvals, which is going to be further down the line. But that's a success for us. Pretty much breezed right through. So I think the pre-planning on that paid off. And finally, just a quick plug for you've seen this the last few years. We've got our Citizens Academy that's going to be starting up in March. It's going to go from March 2nd until May 17th. And we are filling up quick, but we're looking for at least 15 people to hold a class. That's kind of our nexus there of what makes sense and what does not. But we'll go up to, I believe it's 20. So we're looking for applicants, but I'm hoping that with everyone watching tonight, they'll start flowing in quickly. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We've already conducted our closed session concerning a property acquisition issue related to General Statute 143-318.11, subsection A5. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Mr. Chairman, I believe somehow we've missed the appointments to boards and commissions.
Yes, I think you're right. Good eye. Okay. Item 10, Animal Grievance Committee, two appointments.
Mr. Chairman, I would nominate Lori Root and Grant Miller. And I would move that we appoint these two by acclamation.
Motion to appoint by acclamation. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Well, motion carries unanimously. We also have a Board of Adjustment appointment.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we appoint Mr. Bill Leach, who has volunteered. Looking at his resume on the back page there, looks pretty impressive, and as I understand, he would be a good complement to our Board of Adjustments.
Motion so made by Commissioner Bowles to appoint Mr. Leach to the Board of Adjustment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Now, finally, I've been getting ahead of my headlights here. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion carries unanimously. We're adjourned.